and welcome to the session on sustainable automation as SDG 18. As you all know that IGF is probably one of the most impactful forums on the world on the issues of internet and digital technologies with 193 nations as its members, and for this session of IGF, which is the 17th IGF being hosted in Ethiopia and also joined by people live, has 4,000 registrations from 170 plus countries. So welcome to this forum, and I'll give you a backdrop of the dynamic coalition on internet and jobs that has been behind this project sustainable automation. And DC Jobs was founded as a result of the efforts done in 2018 at IGF Paris, where we focused on the fact when during the closing remarks I said that technology should not be just focused on productivity, profits, and proliferation, but we should keep people at the core. That's the center. So with that in mind, we formed DC Jobs, as it's called in the IGF terminology. And our focus is on leveraging internet for creating jobs across sectors, across geographies. For those of you who have worked, I see my fellow panelists, this is the report that we are releasing today, the Sustainable Automation as SDG 18. And the reason we do this and we use the term sustainable automation is that we need to consider whether we need to indiscriminately use automation or discretely use automation. And that's, I think, one of our big reasons. And what we have done in this report is we have looked at countries, large, small. We have looked at sectors, right from agriculture to manufacturing, retail, services. We have also looked at professions. Which professions are getting automated and what's the result? So we have some startling numbers, and when we get into this discussion with our expert panelists today online and even in the audience, is that like if you think country like Brazil, 58% of the jobs will be automated. If you look at the informal sector, 68% of the jobs will be gone. McKinsey says 400 million jobs in 46 countries will be lost by 2030, the year we are going to look at completion of SDGs. And if you look at the top 5 tech companies, their market cap is equivalent to the GDP of 157 nations. And that tells you the divide that we are creating with technology. And 47% of the US labor force will be under threat because of automation. If you look at agriculture in 20th century, in America, 30 million people were in agriculture. And now there are 300,000. So just imagine 30 million to 300,000. That's a huge fall. In manufacturing, 63% of all occupations and 30% of the tasks will get automated. So that's some of the numbers. If we look at the household chores, 90% of them can be done by robots. And when it comes to retail, which is probably one of the fastest growing sectors, that there 53% of all retail activities have a potential to be automated. So this report has extensively covered that. I would say, of course, the data is to be taken with a pinch of salt worldwide for sectors. So, but still, I would say it's representative and indicative of that. And even if you look at healthcare, so we mentioned, people keep questioning, will technology replace doctors? So I'll just give you a small snapshot of the MRCGP exam conducted in the UK. When chatbot took that exam, they scored 81% versus actual doctors scoring just 72%. I think gives us a sense of where the future is. And if I look back, this is not something new that we are seeing for last 10, 20 years. In fact, John Maynard Keynes in 1930 said the increase of technical efficiency has been taking place faster than we can deal with the problem of labor absorption. We've been knowing it for almost close to a century, but it's now that we are seeing the impact. So to discuss this, what we have done is today we have got a panel, and I see almost all -1 online, which happens because it is a hybrid mode, and still I believe that even if we look at technology, human intervention will still be needed. So I have with me today Gunjan. Gunjan Sinha is among the pioneers in internet space and is executive chairman of Matrix Scheme based in San Francisco. Mr. Puranchand Pandey is from Taiwan with over 2 decades of experience, was on the board of World Food Program, has got accolades from UN, has been working on various projects, is the former CEO of the Dialogue of Civilizations Research Institutes, on the Nobel Prize winning World Food Program board, and he's currently the visiting fellow, international fellow at Taiwan Foundation for Democracy. And we have Ashish Thakur, who is from Nepal, is the executive director of Global, works on upskilling. We have Dr. Rishi Bhatnagar, who is an author of the first book on enterprise IoT, was the former global delivery head at a tech company, and also the president and member of the board of Aeris Communication. We have Mr. Suresh Yadav, who is the deputy head at the Secretary General Office, Commonwealth, and he was formerly the OSD to the President of India, and also formerly with World Bank in Washington, DC. So we have quite a distinguished panel, and Rahatul Jana from London, who worked on this project that we're releasing today. So we have panel from across the world, and we are going to shoot the questions to them, starting with, I don't see Gunjan, so I'm just going to move to Dr. Rishi Bhatnagar. Rishi, you are the chairman of the IoT panel, and will automation lead to net job creation or job loss? And what is your suggestion to the policymakers and the industry? And given the massive layoffs that we have seen in the last month or so, would like to hear your views on that. And if my panelists can keep their views for 5 or 6 minutes initially, then we can go back in the next round. Thank you.
So I'll try to put it in 5 minutes, Rajendraji. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. So in 1800s, Rajendraji, when the industrial revolution started in the Western world, all the people who spin the wheel in India lost their jobs. Okay. So whenever there's a technology change and whenever there's a technology advancement, there will be a transformation, there will be a disruption. I'm sure many of us who have some Indian origin will remember that in 1986, when computerization of uh, railways was initiated in India, there was a huge protest throughout the country, and people were saying that we should not get computerization. So the answer is that technology will not stop. We'll have to change ourselves. And today, the huge export of IT that happens from India and the huge amount of jobs that gets created in India because of the IT is result of that revolution that started at that time. So my answer is, uh, first we need to segregate between the current layoffs in the technology companies with the automation. If you see the kind of layoffs that are happening, that are more because of the cost, the growth at any cost. What was the business model? Was it a cash flow? Was people making money out of the kind of investments they had made? As a result, they had to stop and they had to lay off. The answer to the second thing, whenever there is a transformation, whenever there is a disruption, there will be a change in the skills required, and there will be futuristic skills that will be required. There can be a lull where there can be job losses and people will be not knowing what to do. Okay. But there will be new kind of jobs that will be created. There will be new kind of opportunities and the business models that will be created. We should never forget that the human mind is very mature and it is trying to identify things for themselves, and they'll be able to do things which will be beneficial for us. We do not want humans to go into a drain and clean the drainage. That let the robot do it. And so we will definitely require different kind of jobs to be done by the new technological things. And so first, the loss of job, layoffs that are happening throughout the world in the technology area, to me, are not immediate because of the automation, but lack of business model, lack of the growth at any cost. I just want to grow at any cost, and that has resulted into the bubble getting busted. Whenever there will be new technologies, new futuristic technologies, there will be new kind of jobs that will be created. There will be new skills that will be required. People need to be ready for unskilling and skilling themselves for the new jobs. We have a forum, Rajendraji, where we are working towards the future jobs. What will the future jobs? While we are talking about automation, we are talking about how many skills will not be required. 30 million farmers moving towards only 300K. Okay, where that 2.7 million went? What were the new kind of jobs that got created? What were the new kind of business models that were generated? Is something which I think, we should also think of. And for the policymaker, the last part of your question, Ranji, because there is futuristic jobs with the new technologies, how to skill people. In one of the states in India, there are 50,000 drone operators who are getting skilled. Okay, and these drones will be, checking the farms for insects, for pests, and they will be giving reports back to the centralized location. So what I'm trying to say, how many people might have thought that in the rural area there will be 50,000 drone skilled resources that will be required? Okay, and many of them might not be very technically educated, but now they are getting trained and skilled for drone management and drone operations. So what I'm trying to say, there will be new and latest jobs that will be created. The policymakers have to start thinking that they will not be able to stop the technology. You know, in India, Rajendraji, we all know that the Startup India, Stand Up India, Skill India, all those kind of policies and the initiatives the government has taken just to ensure that the people will get themselves trained and skilled for the futuristic jobs. That's my advice to the policymakers, that they have to start thinking about the future jobs and skilling resources and creating the capacity for futuristic jobs that will be there. I pause myself here. I have taken 5 minutes, and I'll whenever there'll be another question, I'll be happy to answer.
Of the layoffs versus the historical transformation that happens on technology. Let me move from India to the neighborhood to Nepal, and Ashish Thakur is from Nepal. So Nepal has a population of about 30 million, out of which one fifth is youth, and internet users are only about 11.51 million. So, what is the ground level scenario for automation in Nepal, and what's the future of automation and jobs in Nepal? Given Ashish that you're also in upskilling through your initiatives, would like to hear from you.
Namaste, everyone, and thanks, Dr. for inviting and giving us a chance to speak. As you have notedly said about Nepal, I would be sticking to that and shooting. In terms of automation, there has been a lot of works which has been going on in terms of automations in all different sectors, whether it be hospitality or it be the finance or anything as such. And we have seen a very good leap in few of these industries where automation has really helped in terms of the industry. For example, the financial transactions. The automation in financial transactions through the use of all these technologies have made a lot of ease in a lot of sense for banking as well. But at the same time, as we are talking about jobs and future of jobs as well, it is it is helping in also cutting down jobs. In terms of industry, it is good. But at the same time, what I would like to relate it to is as a part of research which was done by UNICEF back in 2019, which said that more than half of the students would come out of the schools without the skills needed for future jobs by 2030, and which we are seeing a very big relevance these days, where the working population's gap is also much bigger in Nepal. It's not just about the skills, but also the people availability in Nepal, where we are not having adequate number of working population in Nepal, where they are going to different other countries and working for obvious reasons of better pay and better things there. But that there is something that we need to work on to bring in people, to bring in the working population as well, and now focusing them towards the skill of today. As the previous speaker also very well mentioned about, we need to adapt. The world will keep on changing. We need to adapt to things, and there will, and all of these are also creating new kind of jobs. It is not just eradicating few jobs, but it is also creating new kind of jobs, which we call analysts, which we call copywriters, which we call a lot of other technological intervented jobs, where we have to have a person behind that technology to work on. I see a lot of young people, as we have been running different upskilling and reskilling programs as well in Nepal. I see a lot of young people who are getting into coding, who are getting into designing, who are getting into all sorts of different activities, which are equally or even more at times providing them opportunities and resources for themselves. So what I see in terms of what is happening and in terms of how it is affecting the future of job is there needs to be a job connectivity bridge for the academics, and that is the very niche area that we are working on. We need to keep on adapting as a person, we need to keep on adapting for the new jobs, as well as the academics need to convert into a more applicable and technical and vocational education at this time of academics, so that these skills can be worked out. I'll just give you an example. It's getting hard even to find waiters in restaurant these days. And there is one restaurant in Nepal which was opened by some engineers passed out, engineering students who passed out, and they have these robots as the waiters, right? So that is providing something to that, but at the same time, there needs to be the human intervention when we are going to a hospitality sector or a restaurant or a hotel. We need to have somebody who is treating us, who is talking to us. So that intervention would obviously be needed. And those kind of things need to be reskilled and at a time upskilled with a lot of matters. So that is something which needs to be taken care with the use of vocational and technical education toward academics, as well as converting the earlier skills to a better and reskilled, upskilled human resource like accountants. A lot of things is done by system automated, but then there is a lot of analysis which is needed for better accounting systems. So these things need to be upgraded, and we have seen even the government is trying to develop some new curriculums, and we are supporting in that as well in Nepal. And but we do need to learn a lot from as the earlier speaker also mentioned about Startup India and Skill India. So there are a lot of things that we need to also learn from other places. And there has been a lot of research and formulations going on in terms of bringing on these aspects for future of jobs. And sustainable automation is perfectly fine, but then we need to go and upgrade our skills. We need to have system for youths to upgrade their skills, and that will for sure help in the future of job that is upcoming, and that would also increase a lot of productivity and add a lot of sense. So yeah, for now I'll keep it here, and if there is anything I'd love to answer it again.
Ashish, it's good to hear your perspectives and the point you make about the skills and the system. We'll come to that in the later part. Now jumping to Suresh. Suresh, I've seen you working with the former President of India as his officer on special duty, where you actually brought in tech for the first time at the President's office. Then you have been at the World Bank, and now as a senior leadership team of Commonwealth, you look at 56 countries. So how do you see the stage of tech adoption, and what would your views be on sustainable automation?
Thank you, Professor Gupta. And first of all, congratulations to you and your team for bringing this very important topic of sustainable automation on the global stage. It's very relevant, it's very timely. And I have gone through your report, and it brings out very important facts and figures that where and how things are happening. But the most important thing which I find from your book is about the shift of power, the shift of power from the government sector to the private sector. You have rightly pointed out in your report that how the capitalization, market capitalization of the Apples and many other companies are much higher than many of the countries combined together, which you put the number 179, something like that. So this brings a perspective that how much control the governments have on the sustainable automations. So whether they can define the directions, whether they can decide where they want the automation or where they do not want the automations. So that's a big question mark, particularly if you look at the requirement of the governments for the resources from the international organization, from the private sectors. So that limits the ability of the government to decide. And further, if you look at the foreign direct investment which are coming to the countries, I think again there the countries have no control. Some of the countries, barring few countries, who can decide where they want the investment, whether in high-end manufacturing, low-end manufacturing, trading, services, whatever. So that's a control which probably has shifted from the government to the private sector. It's the private sector which decide where they want to go, and they are able to change the policy and do the business in the cross-border scenario to that extent. So now the question is that if the private sector had the power, then then who is going to decide what should be the level of automation? The government can decide its own processes and procedures. Like I did, as you recall rightly said, I did the complete automation in the president office, and there was huge resistance, as was in 80s about the computerization in the railway, the income tax department, and the other places. So I faced a stiff resistance, but we managed to do it. And what happened in the process, that I was able to cut down maybe 70-80% of the people who were doing the processes with inefficient way. So I got less number of people to do those processes. But at the same time here, I realized that the number of people needed in the other processes has increased. So when I look at the total, the sum, I found that it was like a zero sum game. So similarly, if you look at the global context, that if country X is adopting a very high level of automation, so it's increasing the productivity, it's increasing its profitability, it's increasing its competitive power in the market. So there is a job loss in country X. But in the process, if you look at the outsourcing model, then that company is outsourcing certain processes and the procedures to a country Y. Maybe the accounting, maybe the contract manufacturing, maybe the contract software development, etc. So my question will be that if we start looking the world economy as a whole, instead of looking at country specific scenario, then the results are different. Then at the global level, we will say that the technology adoption in one of the part of the world may be leading to a job creation in the other part of the world. So that's the question. Like if you look at the outsourcing, which India got benefited from the BPO or the legal outsourcing or the other services. So if we start looking at things in a slightly different perspective, then we have a different results. Overall, I will also echo the sentiment that technology will find its way, whether we like it or dislike it. The technology has the power of disruptions. Neither the government can stop, nor the individuals can stop. The best way is to adopt them. The best way is to prepare yourself for those changes. And now the shift has to be from continuous and lifelong learning to continuous and lifelong skilling, so that you are able to adopt to the oncoming changes through the technology, and you are able to better adjust to those emerging ecosystems in the working space. And that's why the discussions on future of work, future of jobs, future of the organization, everything is happening because people know that they can't stop the technology. Look at the crypto. People are skeptical about the crypto, but look at the impact, or look at the penetration which is happening. So it's coming in the parallel to the global economy, if not as a part of the mainstream economy. So I will say that this is inevitable. This is bound to happen. The only response we can have is to collaborate and to prepare our young minds, young people, and the people who are working in the present scenario to be ready to adopt those changes. That will be my message. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Suresh. I think very important point that technology will find its way, whether you walk against it or whether it is your call. I mean, but technology is going to be here and it's going to be transforming the sector it touches. And also the fact that the power is shifting from the government to private sector, which is reflected in our reports too, like the valuation of 5 companies is equivalent to the GDP of 157 nations. It's disproportionately powerful. Now, this brings me to one of my colleagues on the panel, Ratul, who actually worked initially on this report. She is still studying in the UK. Ratul, what would be your view, given the fact that you are doing your masters and you will have a plan for your career, given what we are discussing today? How do you see sustainable automation? What's your view on it?
Thank you, sir, for firstly giving me this opportunity to important topic today. So, while I started with the study, I didn't know that machines would be impacting to a such larger extent. And recently, I have moved to UK. So the things here is really different. Automation here is really high as compared to India. To find part-time jobs, like stores are really automated, it seems pretty tempting with those automated machines where you don't require any human assistance. Like the jobs would that were done manually, people that were traditionally performing like human tasks and all now are done by those machines. So you don't need any human intervention on any human assistance. So there would be machines to guide you. So the tasks that were performed manually earlier are now performed by machines. So you need certain kinds of skills to adopt those changes, and in order to understand those machine languages, people with low skill or like they are not familiar with those machines are really facing it difficult to cope up with this present scenario, the workplace. So I think so automation is leading to high production, high productivity, but at the same time, people are losing their jobs. We are not thinking about human resource. We are only focusing on how to increase the production or meeting up the the requirement of human. At the same time, the jobs that are being taken away, and people are losing jobs, and they're also losing their purchasing power. So this has given rise to unemployment, as a student also I'm facing a problem of finding jobs and all. So what would be the future if we start implementing or installing automation without thinking of a balance, a balance between automation and human? So there would be an excessive installation or using of automation without thinking the jobs that would human require. So I think the less skilled people are going to face this problem if they don't reskill themselves. And also, automation, if used without thinking, like excessive automation, at that point also we are going to risk our future, and people are going to end up with no job, will not have a perfect job that would satisfy our potential. So human would be overtaken by automations, the task would be performed by automation, and human would have nothing left except like reskilling at that point. So if we reskill at the end of our high point of automation, at that point it may be difficult for the dependency ratio to cope up. Countries like having high dependency ratio, even some countries, the developed countries who has a good less population than high populated countries like India and China, would really find it difficult to cope up with this automation phase, since they have to take care of a larger population. It's very important to think about how to take care of automation and implementing automation on sectors, different sectors, and where it's required. It's not something that we blindly install automation everywhere, rather it's required or not. And we look into a sustainable automation where we would be installing automation, but thinking sustainably, where human and machines would go together, but would have a very good future than what we are installing automation right now without thinking where to and where not to. That would be my point. Thank you.
Thanks, Ratul. Very important point that, as a student, you find it hard to get, part-time jobs thanks to automation. And a very important point you brought out about the dependency ratio. And, having heard Ashish, Suresh, Rishi, and you, I think the person whom I would come to is Dr. Puran Chand Pandey, whom I have known for a long time. We had discussions on various issues, including his last assignment with the World Food Program, and it ties in very much to what we discussed last time about the universal basic income. Do you think, Dr. Puran, that the world stage when we can indiscriminately adopt automation and we will be able to factor UBI for all? I mean, given the big divide we are having thanks to technology, which is moving across the productivity divide, which is moving to the financial divide, as we have seen historically. So I think it's a very loaded question for you, but I think given your work, it would not be loaded. I look forward to your views. I think you're muted, Dr. Puran. You need to unmute. We are not able to hear you.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So thank you very much indeed, and I would like to congratulate you and and the team for putting together this very important agenda on the table for our discussions today. I have long had the view that there's nothing right, there's nothing wrong. How to really do things in a way that we could probably try and balance it out in a way that it does not really cut on the wrong side of the human centricity. And I have also long held the view that technology, like anything else in our lives, will have positive side to it and maybe some not so positive dimension to it. Let me paint a scenario based on how technology is evolving and what it might end up doing, which might mean disruptions at a very large scale, which might mean throwing people out of jobs which they have been doing. It could also probably mean how could it really create disruption in the labor market. And if all these things really happen, which is going to be accelerated by excessive technological application, both in our offices and homes and societies, there could be a possibility where, and this could be possibility, I'm not really giving any prediction, but there could be a fairly high degree of potential probability where we could also begin to see social disorder and cost for which could be pretty heavy, both for the governments and also for the private sector, to be able to handle it if it really goes beyond a certain level of degree or a point. This is the downside what technology can do. Now, the positive side of the technology is the technology makes our lives easy. We can do our tasks better, like we are talking to each other from 5 different places altogether. This might have not been possible if we did not really have technology. Technology is also very important because it really makes very crazy things into pretty simpler kind of issues. For example, if I'm traveling, and I will probably give you a very small example of Taipei, which is 24 million people, a very small nation state. But they have been able to do a lot of positive things, which means that this country and what it earns and how people make the money is heavily dependent on technology. And this technology is precision technology, where they make chip which nobody else can make. They're very precise in terms of manufacturing of suits. I never knew until I came to Taipei that the world's best cycles are being made in Taipei. And nobody anywhere around the world can probably match the scale, the accuracy, the kind of product they have been making, and the cycles, which are, of course, selling in Taiwan, but they're being sold around the world, which brings a lot of money back to Taiwan. So this is the kind of the factual thing about technology. So we should not really say either yes or no to technology, but we have to really remember 3 things about technology. How do we really try and find areas and sectors where we could probably try and gradually accelerate the use of technology, keeping in mind how technology could probably move and do what it might need to do. Second thing, while technology is very important and I have nothing against technology, but what I would really like to say is that technology has got to also remember that technology has got to take the human centricity while it moves along. And why we keep on saying that, look, we need to adopt, which is fine. I mean, I have no problem with humans being able to adopt to technology.
I think we lost him. We'll wait to get him back. Or should we move to the next question coming out of the discussions from this? So Rishi pointed out about the lack of business model. And if I combine this with what my current speaker was talking about, social disorders as one of the downsides of disproportionate power in the hands of corporations, which we have seen the numbers in the report tell this story. So Rishi, I will come to you because you have been with MNCs leaving global delivery. No better person than you can tell us what will it take for companies to have the right business model.
I'm see, Rajanji, people need to start thinking there has to be a, business happens for profits. Okay. And when you are in a mature environment, mature corporates will like to have a decent profit, not substantial over one. So once you have a business model that clearly clarifies how the money will flow and how much margins you will make, okay, that is how the business needs to work. But in today's world, if you see many of the business models where I personally have not been able to understand how that model will bring money for the enterprise. Okay. And they're more working on investments and getting some more funding, and how will you return the funding and how that funding will have some kind of returns. I am not able to see that kind of model. And that's what I was telling, that the business model is, if the business model is not there, then the problem will be more of, how will you continue paying salaries? How will you sustain that complete business? And once the business is sustainable, that means it is generating its own cash. You need to see what is the minimum profit you should make. Organizations are meant to make profits. And unless you're going to make a profitable market, a profitable business, it's not sustainable. Otherwise, getting funding, whether it's a government funding or from a corporate, it is not the model that will work. So I have been trying to understand many of the current startups and the older startups and the large technology companies investing in huge amount of things and having no business model of how will they get money generated. And so my simple answer, I don't have a silver bullet to answer that what is the business model and what business model will work. But the business model, the basic requirement is how the money will flow and who will pay and why will they pay and how much should I charge so that I make a decent profit. And the definition of decent profit depends upon individual organizations. Okay. So, but the kind of layoffs that has happened, okay, whether it was, we all know the name of those technology companies where there were layoffs in US and the impact was global. I could not identify how will they be making money. Okay. And what is their business model to generate that revenue which is profitable. As a result, there has been a collapse and they had to let people go. So in whenever anybody starts its business, they had to think about who will buy, why will they buy, and at what price will they make a decent profit. And that is what the whole, whether it's a service or a product, you need to think about these. And if you have answers, you will be able to have a business model that is working. I'm not.
Yeah, I need to move to the next panelist, but a very important point that we'll need to be very mindful about. You cannot have unlimited growth on a limited planet, and I'll give you some numbers. 2018 Apple was 1 trillion, 2020 Apple was 2 trillion, in 17 months it became 3 trillion. I mean, countries' GDP to move from 1 trillion to 2 trillion is a matter of decades. For a company, it is 17 months. I mean, selling iPhones and computers. Now, you know how cash races Apple. I mean, we don't want to, debate that. But I'm stitching this point to the point that Ratul made on dependency ratio. The fact is, there are countries. I mean, I agree the situation will not be the same. For a country like Japan, which has an aging population, will need robots to assist people to do some of the job. Countries like South Korea will need because of the falling fertility rates, and the like companies there that produced mobiles and electronics for the world. But so coming to you, Suresh, I mean, you are a senior leadership team of a multilateral body with 56 nations that is members. How do you see this as a situation evolving before you? And are there any thoughts that you have in mind to shape the thinking of the nations that you represent at the Commonwealth?
Thank you, Professor Gupta, for this question. And let me first thank you for inviting the young colleague Ratul, who has been a part of the new generation and the generation which will be most uh, part of the receiving end of the whole cyclic change which world is seeing. And it also brings me to very other important point that as far as the climate is concerned, we have been talking about intergenerational equity, that what is available to the present generation should also be available to the future generations. So this also brings to the job context, as I can make out from her experience, that it's hard to get the job in advanced economy. But it also points to another very important factor, that the job growth and the job opportunities are going to shift from advanced economies to the developing economies. The jobs will be there where there is a problem, and the problems are there in the developing economies. So now the educational system is there in the advanced economy. The job opportunities are going to be there in developing economy. So how to create a match between two? So I think this will require a great reset in terms of the whole industrialization process, the whole educational systems, and also the mindset that the money lies today in problem solving. Like if you see now India, the third largest ecosystems in the world in terms of the startup, because we have a lot of problems. So that's where the opportunities lie. That's where the profit lies. So this is something which we have to prepare the future generation to ensure that they becomes a job creator rather than a job seekers. That's a fundamental shift which countries have to see. Now coming back to my own Commonwealth of the nation, which is, as you rightly pointed out, is a 56 countries member with 2.5 billion populations and a $13 trillion economy of these 56 countries. And more importantly, which is relevant in this context, is that 60% of the population of these 2.5 billion is under the age of 30. So the biggest challenge which I have been experiencing while talking to the various the heads of the government, the ministers, and everywhere is that how to engage the youth, how to mainstream the youth in the whole process, in their own economy, in their own country. This is the biggest challenge because many of those countries are very much concerned about in the country. If you can't get the youth the capacity to work, the availability of the jobs to them is a big challenge as far as the peace and security in the country is concerned. So what we have been doing is that, as you know, in the Commonwealth, we have a huge opportunities of trading within the Commonwealth countries, and that is an advantage because all these Commonwealth countries are having the same legal system, the same rules and procedure, and almost the same kinds of languages. You know, everybody understands the English. So these countries understand those things in a very similar manner. So that gives an advantage that if you're trading within the Commonwealth countries, if you're investing within the Commonwealth countries, you have 21% advantage vis-a-vis if you trade or invest in a non-Commonwealth country. So we are trying to enhance that 21% to 30% by using the whole digitalization process in the Commonwealth countries so that there is more trade, more investment within Commonwealth countries and creates more opportunities, particularly for the small and medium enterprises, which are considered to be the job creators. So we cannot control the big firms, which are like the Apple, Microsoft, Google we are talking about, but can we make our young people as a part of the ecosystem, which is MSMEs, to become an entrepreneur and create jobs. Each small and medium enterprises in India average are generating jobs from 4.5% to 10 people, So that's where the power lies for the countries which are still in the developing stage. And to that, we had started massive skilling programs for the university graduates. So they are skilled in a way that they can use those skilling programs to get the jobs as well as to start their own entrepreneurship programs. Secondly, we have been trying to reskill the government officials. As we said that technology will find its place, whether it's the private sector or the government. So we can't stop that, how artificial intelligence is going to change the life of the people, whether working in the government or the private. So we have started preparing them through the skilling programs. We have launched AI for the public officials in the Commonwealth countries, and we are trying to ensure that they are fully prepared not only to adopt the AI, but also to understand the plus and minus of the AI. Where is the problem? How their countries are going to face the challenges? What are the hidden things? Which are the biases in the algorithm which can affect their organization and the countries? So these are some of the initiatives which we are trying to work and trying to ensure that the future generation, particularly which have the maximum stake in their own country, in the global peace, in the global order, and for making this planet very safe, are part of this whole agenda for scaling digitalizations and everything. And I'm sure that if we can do that, we will have a very resilient young generations who will be good for themselves, for the country, as well as for a very sustainable and habitable planet. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Here one side debating and discussing sustainable automation, but one thing I also realized that yes, technology is not going away. So yesterday on the main session, the technologies of the future, I announced Project Create, which is about collaborating to realize employment and entrepreneurship for all using through a tech ecosystem. Because certainly the current models are making corporations stronger than nations, and they will definitely prevail upon and change the policies. And the point you brought about the MSMEs, and the tech envoy of the UN was on my panel, and he appreciated the fact that we should talk about job creation, because that's something that people don't talk about. We always talk about profitability, productivity. So this will be one question to you, maybe putting you on the spot. How would you see Commonwealth supporting an initiative like Create? This is under the auspices of our DC jobs at IGF. I'll come back, Puran. I mean, this question is for Suresh.
Right. No, no, that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, I
I'm
will, I
trying to
will. Yeah,
say that I'm back. This
yep.
technology. Yeah.
Suresh, over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Gupta. And I really admire your the capacity and the ability to innovative thinkings and come out with innovative solutions. As I said in the beginning, that the emphasis for creating jobs, and particularly the jobs by using the appropriate technology. I'm neither for the technology nor for against the technology. But if you recall in 70s, India coined a very important term, how to use the appropriate technology. I used to study in the IIT Delhi, and the focus was that which energy is suitable for India's need at that point of time. So this discussion has been for a very long time that it should not be the mad race for automation, that if some country is doing, I should do it. But what is my local need? Am I happy with a simple solution of the problem solving, or should I go for blockchain or crypto or other so-called fancy products in the market? So that's a very individualized country solutions. But coming back to your point, definitely we can explore with you that what models you have in mind and how it can be helpful in creating public goods for the people and for the country. Because anything, whether it's developed by the corporate, whether it's developed by the individuals, whether it's developed by the government, which has a public value, I think we all should come together and support that public initiative, which can be good for the society and the people, and particularly the young population. So I'll be very happy to explore further with you, and I'm a very open minded person, and definitely we can talk much about it, that what is this initiative and how how we can leverage our own platform value as well as the need of the countries for jobs, because the job is number one agenda in most of the countries. Every country is concerned that how to create the job, how to create the young people engaged in the meaningful economic activities, so that they are not only a kind of a resource for the countries, rather than becoming kind of a drain on the country. So that's a question, and very thoughtful of you to go on this line. And please always think that the like-minded people who wants to see a very good world, a safe planet will always be with you.
You are always very sharp in the words you use. You mentioned the word public good and global good. I think that encapsulate everything. The theme of this entire project is internet for all and livelihood for all, because still 2.4 billion people, or 2.7, between these two numbers, whichever is correct, are still not connected to the internet. Now with this, I think in the last 10 minutes or so, would love to pass it on and discussion as questions. Smithy, do we have questions from the online or even within the room? Happy to take them.
Yeah, we have questions online. First is, what can be done to pacify the mass hysteria amongst people that is associated with automation? And second question is, can reskilling of the working population be a solution to tackle unsustainable automation?
So for me to answer, I also served as a member of the Education Policy Committee of the Government of India. The current education system is not in tune with the changing needs of the time. I mean, that's something that we are talking of 18th century education system with a 21st century setup. So this is a complete mismatch. I mean, the four walls are not going to deliver you out of the box thinking. So that has to be rethought. The old paradigm of teaching botany, zoology, chemistry, physics, maths is important, but it's not the only option that we should give to students. So that is one part that we need to redo our education system, more so in light of what COVID has done to us. The second thing about mass hysteria, I think the proof is in the pudding. I think Ratul is one who is doing a master's in London, finds it tough to support her education through a part-time job. That's the reality before us. And that's why for us, this report, Sustainable Automation, is about looking at those challenges and finding a solution. Do we have a solution? No. Do we have to find a solution? Do we don't have a choice? So I think that is where this is a wider debate for us when we look at Project Create, is to work together to find what is that route going to be. Would it be a discrete automation or would it be indiscriminate? Indiscriminate, I don't know, is going to solve everyone's problem. But we need to look at what level we need to use automation and where. That's what I think Dr. Rishi brought out, that we don't have, if the companies, so-called trillion-dollar companies, don't have a business model, then I think it's our job to find out. Yeah. I think there's a question in the room also. We can take that, then we move to online.
Yeah, my question was pretty similar to the second one, but I'll try and frame it a little bit differently. When you were talking about, for example, 99% of agricultural workers are going to be unemployed due to automation. When we're talking about reskilling, obviously it's impossible to give like a proper estimate, but how effective do you think that's going to be for this 99% of people in this field? Can you really reskill 99% of people who are losing their jobs?
So, I can give a perspective from my country's perspective, where we have a very diverse 36 states spread across 1.4 billion population, and different parts of India are looking in different ages. Some have the most advanced, like in Bombay, Delhi, and metros. Some are living in semi-urban areas, some in rural areas. So it's a complex challenge. But the question is, what are we focusing on? We are trying to focus on metros into smart cities. Is that a solution, or should we look at smart villages? I mean, that's the kind of mental shift. I think one of our expert panelists talked about it. We need to rethink the way we look at things. So, but I would actually like if someone from my panel, I have Dr. Puranchand Pandey, who used to be on the board of World Food Program. I'm sure he's looked at topic in much more depth, but given the fact that I was looking, I mean, this is the data that's there in this report, that we'll have to enhance our production by 70% to meet the food needs of 2050. Can you imagine that with the shrinking force? There is no 3D food, that you will get without growing the actual biological nutrients. unless we try to create something out of thin air. So I'll actually pass it on to Dr. Puran Pandey if he wants to chip in, or someone else on the expert panel online.
Situation, there's a scenario, including that of the shift from one level of technology to another level of technology. So there are 75 governments around the world who are now thinking in terms of how to safeguard these young people, safeguard the poor, safeguard the vulnerable, so that they do not really fall off the cliff in a society, giving a lot of potential problem of the social order, whereby then the government will need to spend a lot of money on police, on security, and the consequential difficulties and the problems which society could probably pass through. So I will really stop here, but answering the question, which is about agriculture, you rightly said that with cost of living crisis taking place, and that will be accelerated as we pass into our times, and people will not really have enough food to eat. And even agricultural or agrarian societies will find it pretty hard to continue to feed their own people. And therefore, on the one hand, technology is going to be pretty obvious when it will be deployed to sort of increase the productivity, sees to it that nutrition value in the agricultural product which is being grown in fields is going to be secured, and how will the supply chain from one part of the world where agricultural produce is being grown or produced in a larger quantity will get exported to other countries in Africa, in Middle East, so that people do not really suffer from the hunger, and could probably make both the ends meet. So in times to come, there'll be a lot of premium on how countries and societies are going to grow agricultural products. And this is where I believe, while the jobs might be getting lost in manufacturing or in services, because there is an excessive dose of technology, but there will be sectors like agriculture, sectors like MSME, sectors like household businesses, startups. So I think while on the one hand technology is going to dismantle jobs and throw people out in a very large quantity, but then there are going to be certain sectors where more and more jobs seem to be going to be created, and we have got to be mindful, and this is what I said when I started opening, talking about it, that it is precisely the kind of the duty of the government and the private sector together to see to it that they identify areas, they identify sectors, they identify people, begin to skill them, and then at the same time, begin to give them protection, which is in terms of social safety and security. Unless and until these things are going to be put in place and put in place as quickly as possible, we could probably see technology not only displacing people from several sectors together, but also bringing a lot of social disorder, which might be a very, very difficult proposition for anybody to be able to control beyond a point in time. And therefore, it is not only being able to adopt to technology, but also how do we really see to it that we take away the downside to technology and get them to mitigate, and also create or build
To stop,
resilience.
we are beyond our schedule. So just 10 seconds to everyone on this important question is like, all my panelists, should sustainable development goals have sustainable automation as SDG 18? Yes or no? Just from each one of you before we wrap the session. I would ask Rishi, Suresh, Ashish, Ratul, and then you, Rishi.
Yeah, definitely yes. The sustainable automation is there, and we have to work on it.
Yeah, thank you. I think sustainable automation is very, very important, but whether to go as SDG 18, you have to see SDG 9, whether that sustainable industrialization can cover that. And I think we are too late in the game because we are already halfway past. So whether that can fit in.
Yes, and as Suresh said, focused on decent jobs and industrial automation, industrial sustainable industry. That is something that.
Yes, sustainable automation should be considered as SDG 18.
This is an important area and goes along with SDG 9. And as Suresh said, we are already late in the game because UN system to be able to go back and try and include another goal as any other goal would be very difficult and almost impossible.
Room, like, would you raise hands or hands down to saying SDG 18 or SDG 9 merged with sustainable automation is the way? Maybe just show of hands should be just good. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think an interesting discussion. This is just a primer for debate. We hope that going forward, we will work on it. And I look forward to engaging with you. And thank you so much for joining online. Have a great day or great evening or good night, probably for those who are joining across the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.